Welcome to WESTPAK's webinar entitled Gross Leak Detection versus Dye Penetration for Medical Device Package Testing. Hello, I'm Greg Swinghammer. I'll be your moderator and webinar organizer today. Before we get started, let's take a moment to ensure everyone is ready and familiar with the webinar control panel. First, you should have a control panel on the right side of your screen. You can minimize this panel by clicking on the orange arrow button in the upper left-hand corner. You may expand the panel by clicking on the same button. Secondly, you have the ability to submit questions using the chat pane located near the bottom of the control panel. We'll be answering a few questions during the webinar. However, if we are unable to address your question during the webinar, someone will follow up via email afterwards. For those of you registered and logged into the live webinar, you can download a copy of the slide deck now. It is located in the handout section of the chat pane just above the question area. Feel free to download the slide deck now so you can refer to it later or follow along with us. With that, let's get started. Today's presenter is Nico Celis, a test engineer 2 here at WESTPAK, a third-party product and package testing laboratory with facilities in San Jose and San Diego. Nico began his career here in 2015 after graduating from San Jose State University with a degree in industrial technology. Over the last 4 years, he has advanced through the ranks to test engineer 2. He is a valued member of our production team with his great testing and supervisory skills at work every day. In Nico's spare time, he enjoys watching professional sports, hanging out with friends, and helping with his family's baking business. Okay, let's get started. Nico, take it away.
Thank you for the introduction, Greg. We'll be starting off with what we're covering in this webinar. We will be starting off with defining a medical packaging system. Then we'll discuss dye penetration testing per ASTM standard F1929 and F3039. Next, we'll follow with gross leak detection, bubble testing per ASTM F2096. Then we'll discuss the test methods and test equipment associated with the standards. And lastly, I'll bring up some recommendations based off of my experience with the test methods. For the medical packaging system, we'll start off with the protective packaging. The protective packaging is the most outer layer of the shipper, pictured in the left, which is typically constructed of a corrugated fiberboard box with varying board thickness and flute sizes. The next layer is the secondary or tertiary packaging, depending on design, and this typically consists of an SPS carton. The final layer is the primary package, which is the sterile barrier system. This consists of the pouches or trays which house the medical device. It's very important that the device inside the sterile barrier system remains sterile until opened in an operating room. The sterile barrier system consists of either porous or non-porous packaging. Porous packaging material is intended to provide an environmental and biological barrier while allowing sufficient airflow. The most common type of porous packaging is Tyvek, a material manufactured by DuPont. Tyvek is a spun-bound polyolefin or polyethylene material which allows airflow while maintaining the microbial barrier. Tyvek is tear-resistant, durable, and used for most medical device packaging applications. Next, paper materials are also used for porous packaging. However, paper is not as tear-resistant but will still allow airflow. Next, I'll talk about the non-porous materials used in medical packaging. Non-porous materials do not allow any airflow and are typically constructed with various poly materials and foil packaging as well. The material choice is dependent on the manufacturer's purpose of packaging. For example, light-sensitive products may require foil packaging. Now that we've covered porous and non-porous packaging for the sterile barrier system, we'll next discuss some dye penetration terminology. We'll talk about the dye penetrant, channel, and what wicking is. The dye penetrant is an aqueous solution of a dye and a surfactant designed to penetrate and indicate a defect location in the time prior to the onset of wicking, which could mask its presence. The dye penetrant consists of 3 ingredients. For porous materials per ASTM F1929, the first ingredient is distilled water, which makes up 99.45% of the solution. The next ingredient is the wetting agent, which makes up 0.5%, and per the ASTM F1929 standard, Triton X100 wetting agent is to be used. Lastly, the indicator dye, which is a toluidine blue, makes up 0.05% of the solution. The dye penetrant ingredients for non-porous materials per the ASTM F3039 standard specifies distilled water percentage of 96.95%, 3% wetting agent, which is a polyethylene glycol, as well as 0.05% of the indicator dye. Next, we'll define a channel in regard to dye penetration testing. A channel is a small continuous open passage across the width of a package seal through which microorganisms could pass. The scope of the ASTM F1929 and F3039 standards define a procedure of detecting and locating a leak equal to or greater than a channel formed by a 50 micrometer wire. Lastly, wicking is the migration of a liquid into the body of a fibrous material. This will typically happen with Tyvek packaging and is to not be mistaken with a channel leak. The dye penetrant will seep through the Tyvek layers given a certain period of time. I will begin with the ASTM F3039 standard test method for detecting leaks in non-porous packaging or flexible barrier materials by dye penetration. Method A detects seal leaks or channel leaks in non-porous packaging equal to or greater than a hole formed by a 50 micrometer wire. Method B detects leaks in non-porous flat sheets equal to or greater than a 10 micrometer diameter wire. The ASTM F1929-2015 standard is the standard test method for detecting seal leaks in porous medical packaging by dye penetration. This detects seal leaks in porous packaging equal to or greater than a hole formed by a 50 micrometer wire. This focuses on the seals only and has a total test duration of 20 seconds. Here I will describe the dye penetration procedure for the ASTM F1929 standard for porous packaging. The dye penetrant is injected into the package with a minimum of 1/4 inch on the seal. The package is then rotated to expose each seal edge to the dye penetrant with a total duration of 20 seconds, or 5 seconds per seal. The picture on the left shows what a channel leak looks like within the first 5 seconds of the dye penetrant being exposed to the seal. The channels will be visibly clear. The picture on the right shows the effects of dye wicking when the seal is exposed to the dye penetrant for a duration of over 5 seconds. This is not to be mistaken as a channel leak, as the dye penetrant travels through the porous Tyvek layers. This is why it is crucial to make observations in the first 5 seconds of the dye penetrant exposure to the seal. In summary, the purpose of the ASTM standard F3039 2015 version is to detect leaks in non-porous packaging or flexible barrier materials. There are two methods within the scope, with method A detecting leaks formed by greater than 50 micrometer diameter wire in an edge seal of a non-porous package, and method B detecting leaks formed by greater than 10 micrometer diameter wire in a non-porous flat sheet. This test is a destructive test. The purpose of the ASTM standard F1929 2015 version is to detect seal leaks in porous medical packaging. It is used to detect leaks formed by greater than a 50 micrometer wire in an edge seal formed between a transparent material and a porous sheet by visually observing channel defects by leakage of dye. This is a destructive test as well.
Cool. Thanks, Nico. Great information on dye penetration testing. We got a few questions here, and remember, everybody, if you have any questions during the webinar, please go ahead and send them in using the chat pane located near the bottom of the control panel there. First question we have is, what is considered a pass or fail in regards to dye penetration? Is a 50% seal, a 75% seal, or 100% seal considered failure?
Thank you for the question, Greg. A full channel, 100% of the seal is required for it to consider a failure per the ASTM standards. However, if there is a 25% or a 50% void in the seal, I would recommend examining your package system to find the cause of the voids. We also perform visual inspections for ASTM F1886, which is an inspection for seal integrity, completeness, and uniformity.
Cool. Great, thanks, Nico. Our next question, we are using a pouch, one side polyethylene and the other side medical grade paper, and also using a blister product in a blister closed with Tyvek. We are performing peel and dye testing. Can we perform burst testing or bubble testing as well?
Yes, you can also perform burst and bubble tests as well. The typical order for testing starts with bubble testing, dye testing, and then follows with peel testing or burst testing. The peel testing and burst testing is a destructive test which will not allow for any further dye or bubble testing.
Great, thanks, Nico. Next question is, are voids in the seals considered failures? For our product and sealing process, we do see similar voids, but consider it acceptable.
Voids in the seals are not considered failures. However, similar to the first question answered, I would recommend looking into the cause of the voids in the seals. It may be caused by setup of the wrong sealing parameters or a faulty sealer.
There we go, unmute. What percentage of validation pass testing and what percent fail for dye testing?
So it's pretty uncommon for me to see failures. We will typically see more failures when a client's products are in the development stage. However, when they are in the FDA validation stage, most companies have developed a pretty robust packaging system without failures.
Cool. Next question is, what is the proper sample size for ASTM F1929-15?
So for the proper sample size, we have actually just launched our new website, which includes a sample size calculator. This sample size calculator was created by a statistician and takes into account your confidence level and reliability. We also have other helpful calculators as well in the resources tab on westpak.com.
Great, thanks, Nico. Next question, what is the difference between the dye for porous versus non-porous testing?
So for non-porous testing, you'll need a little bit of a lower viscosity, which is basically more of the wetting agent, whereas the porous testing needs a higher viscosity, which is less of the wetting agent. And you can refer to the slides for the percentages of each.
Great, thanks. Next question, how often is dye testing performed for medical devices versus bubble testing or gross leak?
The most common testing performed on medical device packaging is the gross leak test. The gross leak test checks for leaks throughout the entire package system, which includes both the surfaces and the seals. However, if there is a suspect seal or suspect leak in the seal, a dye test can be performed to confirm that there is a channel in that seal.
Great. Next question, is the same standard for lidded tray and peels and lidded tray than a pouch, a peelable pouch? So if you have a poly tray with a Tyvek lid versus a pouch, do you use the same test or the same standard?
Yeah, so the same standards apply for both lidded trays and pouches.
Great, thanks, Nico. We'll field some more questions as we approach the end of the webinar. Back to you, Nico. Thanks.
Next, we will discuss the gross leak detection test. This is based off the ASTM F2096 2011 version standard. This is a standard test method for detecting gross leaks in packaging by internal pressurization, otherwise known as the bubble test. The purpose of this test is to locate holes between 125 and 250 micrometer in diameter in porous and non-porous packaging. Please refer to the WESTPAK test video in the link below for reference. The procedure for a gross leak detection test is to puncture the packaging with 2 needles. One needle will be the air supply and the other reads the air pressure. The packaging is inflated up to 0.7 psi of air pressure. It is submerged 1 inch underwater and is then inspected for any streams of bubbles coming from the packaging. The first common failure mode for gross leak detection testing is stress cracking. The possible causes of stress cracking is typically found from compound folding, excessive pouch length, or universal packaging configurations. Some recommendations to avoid this is to use the proper size pouch or use a stronger or more flexible laminate material, for example nylon, to prevent any folding found at the edges. The next common failure mode is punctured surfaces. Pouch punctures are typically caused by protruding objects in the pouch. They happen throughout the distribution process by constant abrasion. Some recommendations to avoid punctured surfaces is to use a device card to contain the protruding objects, or applying plastic covers to sharp or irregular objects, or lastly using a thermoform tray which will better contain the device. The next common failure mode is tray cracking. The possible causes for this are from impact testing in distribution, tray bend radius that is too tight, or extreme aging temperatures. Recommendations to avoid this are tray redesign by changing the tray geometry and using a less brittle or more ductile material, or using a lower accelerated aging temperature. The last failure mode we'll discuss are sealing issues. Possible causes for sealing issues are from equipment setup issues, bad sealing parameters, or protruding package contents in the seal. The picture on the left shows folding during the sealing process, and the picture on the right shows voids during the sealing process. Recommendations to avoid this are to check your sealing equipment and ensure that you have the proper sealing parameters prior to conducting your full packaging validation. In summary, the purpose of the ASTM standard F2096 2011 version is to detect gross leaks down to 125 to 250 micrometers in porous or non-porous packaging. The top defects observed in gross leak detection testing are stress cracking, punctured surfaces, tray cracking, or sealing issues. This is a destructive test.
Great, thanks for that neat information on bubble testing, Nico. We have a few more questions here, so let's see if we can get them all answered. So the next question is, any information on, do you consider bubble emission and visual inspection sufficient to meet ISO 11607 requirements, or do you recommend both bubble and dye testing to show integrity?
So both bubble emission and visual inspection are sufficient to meet the ISO 11607 requirements, and depending on what your validation process is and on your testing needs, a dye test can be included. However, most of our clients tend to just perform the bubble test.
Great, thanks, Nico. Next question, are blocking agents used on Tyvek to prevent bubbles, or fizzing, sometimes it's called?
Yes, for the ASTM F2096 standard, a blocking agent can be used to reduce the amount of breathing coming from the Tyvek packaging, and it can also help the user determine the known failure. However, only a minimal amount is to be used, but here at WESTPAK, we generally do not use blocking agents.
Great, thank you. Next question, are there patches or stickers you can attach to problem areas common to pinholes?
So I would recommend not applying anything to the outside of the packaging and instead focus on the protruding objects within the packaging to prevent this type of failure. And if you would like, you can reach out to us after the webinar so that we can talk about your specific packaging design or anything that is an issue.
Cool, thanks, Nico. Next question, during the bubble leak test, how do you inflate porous materials?
The process for inflating porous materials is the same as non-porous. The package is inflated with the air needle, and the pressure is recorded with a separate needle. You'll see more breathing, obviously, with the porous materials. However, it is just a characteristic of that kind of packaging.
Great, thank you. Next question, how does one determine proper pouch size in order to reduce stress cracking or other common failures?
The proper pouch size is dependent on each specific product. Feel free to reach out to us again after the webinar and we can discuss your packaging design.
Great. Next question, what is the, we already answered that one in the previous section, but we'll go over it again. I think it's a good one. What is the appropriate sample size for testing?
So we can refer to our calculator on our newly launched website. Yeah, this calculator was made by a statistician, and we have plenty of other resources on the website as well.
Great, thanks. How many control samples do you use to achieve the minimum test pressure?
Only one control sample is required to determine the minimum test pressure. The size of the defect is documented, and the pressure at which a steady stream of bubbles begins is documented for the minimum test pressure.
Great, thanks. Next question. How do we perform the bubble leak test with Tyvek without having false negatives?
So there's a clear distinction with natural breathing of the Tyvek material and a leak. A leak will have a constant stream of bubbles that lets out air at a faster rate than what the breathing of the Tyvek does.
Great, thanks. Next question. Is it possible to do dye penetration after bubble leak testing?
Yes, and that's the typical order that most of our clients will perform this testing. We'll start off with the gross leak test, follow with a dye test, and then lead on with the seal strength test.
Great. One other quick question. Do you have to give any time between the bubble dye and peel testing?
Yes, we let the sample sit for a minimum of 1 day or overnight before we move on to the next test input, and that's to ensure that proper drying has been happened.
Great. We have a few more questions here, but they're going to require a little back-end research for us to look into. It's not stuff we kind of know off the top of our head, and we don't want to give a incorrect or bad answer here. So a few more are just coming in here. Let's see here. Does the dye penetration testing impact seal strength results?
No, the dye penetration testing should not impact the seal strength results. If it's a uniform and continuous seal, it'll be unaffected by the dye penetrant.
Great, thank you, Nico. Like I said, the questions that have come in, we need to look into a little bit further. We'll get back to those folks after the webinar. We'll do a little wrap up here, and if you missed anything, feel free to download the slides or come back to the 2 o'clock webinar this afternoon. Thanks everybody for attending. Here are the ASTM standards we discussed today, all of which are available directly from ASTM. Thank you all who submitted questions and comments. We really appreciate your active participation. For anyone whose questions did not get answered, we should respond to you directly via email within a few days. You can submit any questions or quote requests you have to WESTPAK using the Contact Us links shown here or on our new website. Or of course, you can just simply call us. If you missed anything and would like to listen to the webinar again, please go to our website, www.westpak.com, under the Resources and Webinar tab. The webinar materials will be uploaded within the next couple of days. WESTPAK is a third-party independent test laboratory specializing in mechanical and environmental testing. Our labs are ISTA certified and ISO 17025 accredited. WESTPAK began its operations in 1986. We've been 100% employee-owned since 2017. WESTPAK currently has testing laboratories in San Jose and San Diego, California. Please expect to receive a survey request soon. We ask that you take a few seconds to give us your input because we highly value your opinion and comments. You also have the opportunity to ask questions and suggest future topics. Thank you all for attending. I'm Greg Schwinghammer. Make it a great day.